So let it be written. So let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors. We're doing a deep dive into finding the right gaming group for RPGs. So I think something that a lot of people don't consider is that an RPG, when you sit down and you play, is unlike pretty much anything else. And there is this magnetic connection that usually happens around the table, and it can be positive or negative. And so the thing I want to start this video off with, I don't want to scare you, but I want to make sure you understand that this is a relationship you're getting into, and that being in a bad gaming group can give you just as many feelings of anxiety and stress and all that as being in any other bad relationship. And so while it is definitely something that takes practice and you've got to experience it, and there's just really no secret, honestly, you have to go in knowing that you shouldn't settle either. And that this is like any other relationship. Try to keep it to where it is a healthy relationship. Find the one that is right for you. Find the one that it is positive for you and that you have a good experience with. Easier said than done, but I just wanted to kick it off by saying, don't take this lightly, but also don't be afraid. So I've probably thoroughly confused you, but just don't take it lightly, and at least you owe it to yourself to find awesome people that are as awesome as you.
Yeah, I think that it's easy, especially for people who have had difficulties finding, like who have wanted a game for a long time and struggled to find like that right one. You can start to like sort of develop like a scarcity mentality about it. Well, it's like, I found this group and I hate that guy. And every time we play the game, I end up less happy than I was going into it. But if I quit, like I might never be able to find a group again. Like maybe this is just the only thing that I can get. And it's just, now more than ever, like that's just not the case. There are like amazing and fulfilling groups that run great games all the time, and you can find those sorts of experiences. So if you have that gut reaction of like, I got into this game and immediately this guy is just like absolutely repellent to what I want out of the game. Just we are conflicting about everything. It's just not working. It's totally okay to say like, okay, I want to play this, but a bad tabletop group can often be worse than no group at all and trying to find a good one. At least in my experiences, like those bad experiences can be so bad and so tumultuous sometimes that it ends up being worse for you than if you just try to be a little bit more patient. And it can be frustrating sometimes for sure to try to work around and just, you don't have to take those sorts of experiences. You can get what you want out of the game, and you can find people who also want that thing, whatever that is.
I definitely agree that there are a lot of groups out there looking for people. Obviously not maybe as many as people are looking for groups, but it is important to remember that you will always be able to find another one if you look. Especially recently, I've seen 3 or 4 people that have said, oh, I haven't played in, 10, 15 years, but I'd love to get back into it. And they're able to now even more. I mean, they must have been, lucky if they played, say, in the 80s, where it's like you had to know people that played. That was kind of the only way. But we've come so far now. But I definitely can't over stress how important it is not to put up with a bad group, because you will eventually hate the game, I think, in my opinion. But in the same respect, it's also important to remember that if you have a bad game, it doesn't mean you will always have bad games. This is another thing I've seen where it's kind of guaranteed if you go to a gaming convention that you can find a seat at a table. But it's important to remember that experience while you're playing D&D or maybe some other RPG is closely tied to those people, not that game or the culture. In my opinion, it's worth bringing that up, because having a bad game or having a bad player in a convention game doesn't mean that you'll never enjoy it. And I've definitely seen some people walk away with a bad taste in their mouth just because they had one bad experience. You're likely to have bad experiences. Just remember that you're aiming for a good experience and will hopefully eventually be able to find that.
Yeah, and
yeah, I mean,
oh, you go ahead.
There you go. I was just gonna say it's so easy to kind of start to mix up things like tabletop gaming with things like video games or board games where it's like there's often kind of just one way to like play that experience. Like if I buy a video game, you kind of have to play within the walls of that programming, and you can kind of only get the experience out of the game that it's meant to give you. And same thing with board games and a lot of like different hobbies like that. But there's so many different play styles to tabletop RPGs that if you get into a group that you don't like, it's often going to be the group that you don't like, not the game overall. Like there's ways to, like I've played, a lot of games of 5e at this point, like a lot of games. And there are so many different ways on a big picture scale how those games have played out. So I think it can't be understated what James has said there of like, you may go into a certain group and hate the way that they played, but you could play with the same exact rules system and have a radically different experience with how the game plays because of what those people want to do and the sort of freedom that the tabletop RPG form allows people to have when they inject their own sorts of creativity and experience desires from the whole thing.
Yeah, and so that's what I keep thinking is that it's very leveled in the terms that it's like there are definitely people who are going to just take whatever they can get. But then the more you play and the more you kind of get comfortable with the idea of like, well, no, this is like at least 4 hours. I want to make sure that I'm spending this in a way that's fun for me and that time is scarce. And so I feel like it can sometimes be a process where you're like, all right, tried that one. Okay, I'm going to try this one and you might not be able to both, hey, I want to play, and also, hey, I want to play with this particular kind of person. Sometimes they might not, coincide. You're like, all right, well, hey, it's better than no D&D, and that's where you have to kind of make up that in your own mind if the experience is worth however you feel afterwards. So what I was going to say is the other thing to really look at, and it seems so basic, but try to find people you would hang out with anyway. Like, I know that's probably like, well, and this to me is like the golden ring. This is the group. Usually if you're going to find the group, what you'll also find peripherally is you also share similar pop culture references. You also share at least a relative sense of humor. It doesn't mean you have to be the same, just like any relationship. Like my wife and I are very different in some ways, but we're the same in the ways that matter the most. It's like, they say about any good relationship is like, the person has the bolt that the other screw is missing, that kind of thing. You're going to find that a really good group, you should be able to, in the downtime with no game, no rules, have general positive experience and have a good time. And so how do you find them? Well, we luckily live in an age where everyone talks about everything online. So that's why I highly recommend the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group, because you can kind of go through and very real. You just say, oh, hey, this person posted interest. Well, here's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you straight out. I look at your post history. And if you're rude or if you seem like someone who I wouldn't want to interact with on Facebook just regularly, I won't even consider it. But, someone like Jeff, I mean, the truth is, Jeff, he had consistent, helpful, positive experiences all over the internet. Everywhere I saw Jeff interacting, I'm like, this is a cool guy. He has really good things to say, and he takes the time to say them. I mean, and that's how he is a part of even Tabletop Terrors, to take it to the full-blown, logical extreme. So anyway, I guess my point is try to find people who you would normally hang out with. And nowadays, with Facebook and other social media, there's a lot of evidence that you can gather before you jump into this relationship.
Another very important thing to remember is that every group that gets started was started by somebody. This path isn't for everyone, because if you really don't know anything about RPGs, it can be difficult to go get the book and learn it all and find people. But it's usually a little bit easier to convince people to play if you're saying, hey, if you come over, I'll facilitate the whole thing. You just come over and be ready to play a game, with a rough idea of how it works. And this very same thing works online, because if people are posting, games, hey, they're looking for people and you post interest, you could do that plenty of times, never getting chosen, whether that's because people don't know you or, there's just a lot of interest so you don't get chosen. There's plenty of reasons that can happen. And it's usually not personal. The important thing is if you say, hey guys, I'm hosting a game, what 4 or 5, however many people you want to play with me, you're kind of always guaranteed to get in a game. If the timing's right and you can figure it out, you'll get people to play with. The beauty of this is you can sometimes get stuck being the only one that runs it. But if you do it online, especially where these other people that are going to be your players are posting games and playing in games, you're far more likely to get chosen for their next game if they enjoyed playing with you. And like I said, it's kind of an easy way to get in a game to meet people. If you're saying, hey guys, I'll run it, I'll do all the prep work, I'll set it all up, just show up. And that really goes a long way to finding a group because, like I said, it's an easy way to get into a game.
Yeah, and I think it can't go without saying too that like the easier that you can make it for other people to get it to just jump into something, the more likely they are to want to be able to do it. So if they don't have to do any of that work, you say, of trying to wrangle all the cats, and get everything ready to play, that you'll say, hey, I'll cover all the bases. I'll host the video call. I'll plan the game. You just like show up and sit down. Like that can be a great way to sort of get people who might be on the fence of like, is this worth the time or not? To kind of flip over into that sense of like, okay, yeah, this is worth trying. And honestly, it's the only way that you can guarantee for sure that you're going to be a part of a game is to be the person who makes it. Like James said, there's always going to be that chance of like, I see this game, it looks really fun. That would be such a great experience. I'm going to try to get into it. And then like you don't end up getting chosen for it. And like what James said is true of the sense of like, that's not necessarily any reflection against you. It's just like, if you have 15 people who say they want to play in a game, that's going to have 5 people. Some people are going to have to, not everyone can join in, especially online where the number of people you really start to feel it in a different way than you do when you're at a home group table, at least in my experience. So being willing to take the first step to do some of the legwork can be a great way to show people that you care about what's going to happen and that you want the experience to be good. And that can help reassure people who might otherwise not know that this faceless person on the internet is going to be worth their time. But if you make it worth their time, then it helps to bridge that gap a lot more. And it can help to get you into other things. And like James said, once you kind of run a game and you get people that you like playing with, the chances that you can keep playing with them through other means goes way up. That's exactly what's happened to me. There's been games where like I'll get into a game, I'll play in a game with those people, and we'll all really like the experience. And then, cut to a month later when a new campaign is starting up, and the guy who I played with in that game just reaches out to me specifically and was like, hey, I really liked playing with you in that game. Would you be interested in playing in this game with me too? Yeah, I'd love to do that. And it's just like, you can kind of find these sorts of circles of players that you like. You all know you like playing together. You all know it's going to be a fun experience, that everyone's after the same thing. And the chances that you get into future projects with those people goes way, way up because you kind of proved that it's going to be worth the time.
Yeah, and I feel like, so it's funny, I was reading this article on how to get out of debt, and, you're reading through, and it's like, okay, do this practical thing, and then do this practical thing, and then one of the things is like, and then my parents gave me $12,500 to pay off my townhouse. And you're like, wait, this isn't advice. You're just telling me about how you basically got super fortunate, and that's not applicable. I say all that to say that we, the 3 of us, are absolutely the people who, for gaming groups, their parents paid off our townhouse. Like, I found the group that I love to play with and also started a publishing company with my first try. It's not common. It's the lotto. I hit the lottery. So I want to give you some practical information because it's like, well, what? This isn't a tips video. Yes, it is, because I'm going to show you, and I'm going to give you very specific practical advice of how you can do exactly what we did. So we're going to put a pin in games that happen in person. I can't help you with that. That's a whole nother thing, and we can maybe hit on that later in the video, but there are so many. So, pin. We're talking just about online games. go to the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group, and you're not going to get into a game right away, okay? Because no one knows you. They don't have that. You could be anyone, you know. Go there, join the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group, and thoughtfully spend your time once or twice a day replying to some posts. Get to know people. Post some things yourself. I'm just going to assume that you're a moderately kind, generally good person who knows how to interact with people online. That is required. From there, after a week of that, 7 days of just comment here and a comment here and a thoughtful thing here and a post, you know, however often you can, but it has to be at least once a day, you know, whether you comment or post or whatever. Then go up into the search bar and type interest post, or you can search the tags that we have in the group. And then post that you're interested, right? Bonus tip, give a reasonable, cool reason, like just give a cool reason why you're interested. Hey, I'm really interested in this game because the thematic stuff that you mentioned seemed like something that I'm really into, and I really love murder mysteries. I've read quite a few. Okay, already I want to pick you because you're giving me that extra little mustard. So that is my exact way, like this next 7 days of how you can try to replicate what we have. Now, Jeff, you told me a little story about how you tried to do this, and I think it's important to share that. So how did that go for you? To give people realistic expectations.
So I have been lucky with where I've ended up, but it was not quite so immediate as Tim's experience, in the sense that mine was absolutely not my first try. It wasn't even my first 8 or 9 tries that like really started to hit. But I will say specifically that what Tim is mentioning is extremely important in the sense that if people are looking for players and the only thing that they ever see from you is just that you want to play in a game, that's useful in a sense of like, well, that's another option on the table. But because D&D and tabletop games in general are so play style dependent, finding people who you know are going to gel with what you're trying to do is very important. So the more that you can have out there about what you think about the game, what you like out of a game, the more context that other people have in terms of whether or not they'll be interested in having you in a game. So it can't be understated the importance of participating in conversations, not just about looking for games, but just about anything about the game, posting questions that you have or interesting sort of thought scenarios that you want to put out and get people's opinions on. Like things like this can be a great way to sort of put the feelers out there to say like, oh, like this person, you know, both of these people said they wanted to play in my game, but I've seen both of them comment on this post. One of them, they talk about combat like in a completely different way than I do. It's like, it's almost foreign how different we look at combat. And this guy, it's like lockstep on the same page. We have the same philosophy. We have the same understanding, the same enjoyment. Like, I'm going to pick that guy because I know it's going to go well. And the difficult truth is 4 hours is a lot of time to spend with people who aren't going to make the game better. So people are generally going to lean to safe bets over unknown quantities. So the more that you can make yourself a known quantity, talking about what you like and what you think, and you know, building relationships with people outside of specifically looking for games, it's going to put you in a lot better of a position. And this is kind of a lot of what I've did in the Absolute Tabletop group is just like posting interest in a lot of games, sure, but also, you know, making my own posts to get people talking about something that I thought was interesting, or going to other people's posts about questions and giving my take on what they were saying, and, you know, replying to other people's comments about what I agreed with and things like that. You start to sort of find people who think similarly to you and kind of want the same game experience to you. But the one thing that I think is really important to mention is that Tim's experience of getting it right on your first try is a rarity. It's an extreme rarity, even, I would say. And that, like, I think he would acknowledge that he's very lucky that it happened that way. But more often than not, it's going to be a little bit of an uphill climb to find the group. So I've gotten to a point now where I can play in a lot of games and I know a lot of people who I enjoy playing with. But it took me a good couple months to sort of build that process up of like starting out in the group and having nothing to my name and no sort of connections within any of the people. Of just like the first many times I tried to get into a game, I just didn't get picked at all. It wasn't even considered. And it was just like throwing out, words into the void and not getting anything back. And even then, the next couple games that I did actually get into, I didn't really enjoy playing with those people that much. It wasn't the experience that I was looking for. And it's very easy to get discouraged, to feel like you're just wasting your time or just throwing something out there and never getting anything back. Or even if you do get something back, it's so far from what you want out of the game that it's not fun. And it's just, I think, important to acknowledge straight up that there's a big element of chance and probability that goes into these sorts of things. Sometimes it may take you many tries before you get what you want. But I promise that it is out there, that you can find people who you want to play with, who will get you the sort of experience that you want, and that you will give them the sort of experience they want. You can find and build these groups, but it might not happen right away. It took me, I'd say, probably 6 to 8 months of pretty deliberate, consistent action to find a group that I really genuinely enjoyed. And that's like every day I'm posting in the group and talking to people and trying to run games for beginners and trying to get into people's games. Like, it can take a little bit of time to get established, and it might not be worth the effort for you. And that's just something you'll have to be honest with yourself about. But if you do want to put in the effort, it might take some time and it can be frustrating, but you can get there. I think that's at least how my story has been.
And to put an even finer point on how lucky Tim was, I get into games because Tim got really lucky, because I'm Tim's brother. And so I love playing D&D, and Tim and I had played for a long time.
Nepotism, baby.
100% that, because I was actually, the game that he got into, I had a chance to play in later. I didn't end up being able to commit the time and stuff. But like you said, we started a publishing company and everything. A lot of these things would have taken a lot more effort from me. And specifically, it's not something that I'm not good at. So it does take work. But to hopefully temper that a little bit, make that feel a little bit better, it does take work. Jeff said, he spent 6 to 8 months to find the group that like he really, really, really liked. But the important thing is, it's not, there's a phrase for this, it's not zero sum. The idea is every time you play, even if it wasn't absolutely your favorite, you still hopefully had fun at the very least. But you also found what you may have not really enjoyed about that. You maybe, more reasonably defined what you do really like. So going into the next game. The other thing is, a lot of times I hear people talk in terms of groups, and especially in person, that's common because it's kind of the same 5 people that come to your house or you go play with. But especially in a case of online, it's a lot less about groups. It's more about the specific people, where I've played in games with Jeff and I've played in games with Tim. Don't think I've played it in a game with Tim and Jeff. I'm like, it's a bunch of different people, but all the same pool. So if it seems like that 6 to 8 months is a long time, all of those posts, Jeff enjoyed reading. I do the same thing. You go in the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group and you see really cool concepts, and you can throw your hat in the ring of, this is how I would, do that rule, or this is what I was thinking about for a talent system. And before you know it, you're making friends. So I just wanted to point out that it does take a while, but it's, with any luck, it will only better your life, and it will sort of create a very different community of people that you would never have met and never interacted with, that probably like very much the same thing as you. So if it does seem like a lot of effort, remember that it is, but the only thing you get out of it isn't just playing D&D sometimes. You might find, your best friends for the next decade. And that's definitely something that is hard to, put a price on as far as how much time you're willing to spend doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to like deliberately say and cap off of like that story of all that time and effort does have a happy ending for me. Like, not only have I found many groups that I've gotten to play with in some of my favorite RPG games of all time, but like what James just said is like exactly what's happened for me. Of like, not only do I have groups that I play with regularly who are great players, but those people are like some of my best friends that I've met ever, and when you take the time to build good connections, it does much more for you than just the gaming experience. And yeah, I think it's important to state that all that effort, especially for me at least, was not wasted effort, that it did provide me fulfillment along the way, sure, like what James is saying, but also like I've gotten to a point now where I have a great pool of people that I regularly get to interact with. So yeah, the story does end well, you know, if you can get to that point.
Yeah, and so I want to say this too, that just to prove that the system does work is that I hit the lottery. So there's no question in my mind about the amount of good fortune that I hit. But there's also something to be said of how it happened. It was the same formula. I just went big. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Instead of joining a Facebook group and kind of doing it, I saw, this is before 5e blew up and D&D was still sort of under the radar in terms of like popularity. So at the time, there were, I'm not joking, there were maybe 5 or 6 YouTube channels that were really decent size. By decent size, I mean like 3,000 subscribers, 3,000 to 5,000 subscribers that even talked about D&D regularly. Yes, I'm serious. And so I started a YouTube channel with James. But if you look on this channel, Tabletop Terrors, the first video is called like, it's dedicated to like a few of the channels that I found. And I was like, hey, just wanted to shout out to my, the people that inspired me to just jump out there and do it. And it's about progress over perfection. And before knowing anything about YouTube or anything, I just made a video in my office and threw it out there. And then one of those YouTube channels that I followed, they were doing these sort of shout out videos and talking about this sort of informal Facebook group. But it was like a YouTube group that of creators who would shout out to each other, and they started calling themselves like the YouTube RPG YouTube Brigade. And so whatever. Anyway, I was like, well, I'm going to actively seek this thing. This is cool. This sounds like the people I want to hang out with. And I saw their channels. So rather than positioning myself as just a viewer, I'm like, well, I'm going to be a creator. I'm going to make content. And good or bad, it exists. And good or bad, it was me joining that Facebook group. It was called the RPG Brigade. It was me joining that Facebook group and having a channel and putting out content that made Matt Click and Michael Barker see like, oh, they saw my personality through the YouTube videos. They saw me interacting with James. They saw, and I would consistently post in there. I helped out. I was brand new to this group, and I helped put on a convention called Brigade Con. I did not know a lot of these people, but I gave a bunch of time. I donated graphic design, like immediately. I was trying to make deposits into this community. So an awesome person in that community, Matt Click, chose me as one of 4 people to join a one-shot. It was supposed to just be a one-shot. And so then that turned into the Provokers, which then domino to today. The reason why I go through that whole long story is the principles are dead set exactly the same. I just did it at a higher level, in my opinion. I just went crazy. I was like, I'm going to do a YouTube channel. So yes, I got super fortunate, but I did the exact same thing, if that makes sense. I wanted to make sure that was clarified, that like it still was kind of that. So do what we're saying.
Yeah, it looks like luck when you only see the end result, and you cut out like the hours and hours and hours of time that you put into actually making that happen, which I think it's important to say.
Yeah.
I think it's a difficult thing to say so bluntly, but I think it's important to say is that if you're going to be interacting in these sorts of communities, watch what you say and how you say it, because people pay attention and it's very easy to burn bridges. There are many people who I've seen come through these sorts of communities. They'll post whining about how they're just so frustrated with everybody in the group, and they'll comment on people's posts like attacking and insulting people. and then wonder why they can't get into any of the games that are in the group. And it's like, well, you kind of look, like a jerk. So that's why I'm not going to play with you. So obviously there's a certain amount of like, if you want a certain type of game experience, you don't want to hide that from people. You don't want to like be somebody that you're not, because then you won't get what you want out of the community at all. But there's going to be a very much a sense of, you need to be contributing not just words, but words that help, and being nice to people and being somebody that people enjoy having around is not just as important, but far, far more important than how good you are at RPGs. You could be a crackshot role player, a genius strategist and mechanics person with the game. But if you're frustrating or annoying or like, difficult to be around, that will overshadow anything else. And the opposite is also true, where if you're a great guy and you're always bringing something great to the community and you're fun to be around, and that can often make up for like, he's maybe not the best role player, but I think he can get better if we give him a couple tries. And he's just awesome. Like, he's fun to hang out with. I enjoy him being around, so we'll give him a try. Like, I've seen that conversation play out so many times with people who have ended up becoming staples of the community, who grew into that sort of being better as a player and being better as a game master, just as a result of being fun to have in the group, and that can do a lot.
Yeah, I don't think it can be overstated that you have to be someone people want to be around. But it made me think of it in a different way as well, which is a lot of times this whole video was about finding a D&D group. But really, if you look at it a different way, you're finding friends to play D&D with. You have to be friends first. Not that you have to... That makes it sound more difficult, but it kind of is. These have to be people that you want to sit around a table or online for 4 hours with and have a good time, and at the end go, that was great. And especially in the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group, that specific Facebook community is all about positivity and friendships. So much so to the point where I haven't played D&D in months now. Certainly not publicly, like through that group. And still, I go in there and I comment, and I've made really good friends. I know a lot of people in there that post that don't really play RPGs that much. I don't personally feel like I have the best handle on all the rules. I couldn't recite, 5th edition rules. So I just want to make it clear that as long as you are being a good friend or somebody that somebody would want to be friends with, you can play RPGs. But I don't think that really works the other way around. Again, not even if you're just a jerk, but if you're not willing to put in the time to get to know certain people, they come together. And I don't think you can reasonably have one without the other. So it's important to remember that even if your goal is just to find a good group, remember that you are also finding people you're going to spend a lot of time with. And hopefully these people are going to enrich your life. And again, that should make the amount of effort it takes worth it, because you're not just showing up to a laser tag venue and playing with whoever's there. It's very different. You're trying to, again, meet people you're going to be very close with, because especially in terms of RPGs, things can get kind of emotional in an RPG sense, right? You have to be comfortable with the people you're playing with. I suppose it depends on your play style, but I've broke into tears during games, not like full on sobbing, but a moment like really hit me. And there are only some people I'd be comfortable doing that around. I've also played games where somebody was a gnome that, came from a garden and we had fun, and somebody stole their hat and, a spell made them big. Like, it was hilarious. You know what I mean? No problem. But specifically for me, I have played with people. The best games I've played have been people that I have very good connections with, but not so much vice versa. I've never had a really good connection in a game with somebody that I didn't know, so I don't think you can have one without the other. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, and I think, so to kind of, start bringing it to a close here, and, obviously if you guys have final thoughts, throw them out there, but, let's talk about what happens if you do find a group immediately. Very quickly, some absolute best practices, which is don't miss the game. Like, don't, if things come up, be overly communicative, but I'm telling you, nothing will get you blacklisted if you like are a no-show. If you just can, if it's like, yeah, that person, I choose them for my games, but they never show up, or they always have something come up at the last minute, or it's about what the pattern is. So if the minute you know you're not going to be able to make the game, and don't let it be because you're like, oops, I double booked and I'm going to see Star Wars that day. It's like, you should know when you commit to a game, or when you ask to commit to a game, what the situation is there. But be sure that you tell the game master and all the players, hey, listen, I apologize. You know, please give my spot away as soon as you can. But that should be a rarity, like 1 in 15, 1 in 20 if possible. And then the other thing is, be prepared. So when you show up, have your character created, have everything ready, show up early for the game by at least 10 minutes, 5 minutes. But I mean, really 10, 15 is really great. So you can kind of sit, get situated. If you do those two things, you always show up and you're always a little early and prepared. That is the way to just ensure that you're constantly selected, because I'm like, yep, Jeff, you really nailed it with your phrasing, which is like, I'm not going to gamble. I'm going with the known quantity here. I'm like, I know this person shows up. I know they're ready. I would like to actually play this game the way I'm envisioning it. And the only way to make that happen is if the players all show up. So those are just two major things I wanted to mention, is don't biff it once you get in. Don't win the lotto and then lose the ticket, or throw it away.
Yeah, I think the sort of thing that I'll kind of cap my end off on is that, like, kind of tying into both before and like leading into a game, if you do get picked, as much as possible, especially if you're the one hosting this experience, but even as a player kind of looking to join in other games, as much as possible, you want to front load expectations about what the game is going to be like and what the game is going to be about, so that you can ensure that people who are committing to the game know what they're getting into, and that you, when you are committing to a game, know what you're getting into. So, for example, I'm someone who tends to prefer more serious games. Like, I don't like a lot of like crazy, chaotic shenanigans. Every once in a while it's fun, but for the most part, like, I want it to be pretty straight shot. So, like, in my games, when I post an interest post, I'll put in the tags like, this is going to be more heavy role play. This is going to be a little bit more dramatic. This is going to be a little bit more dangerous. It's not just going to be whatever, cracking jokes, whatever. And that's not to say anything against that style of play. It's just not what I want. But I'll say that up front. This is what the game is going to be about. These are the themes of the game. If that's going to be a problem, either because it'll make you not interested, or it's going to be content that you'd find troubling, or if it's going to, in anything like that, the more that you can say about all that before you get into the game and before you pick players or before you're chosen for a game, the better everything is going to be, because you can kind of cut out that misfire of like, oh, I got into a game, this is going to be so much fun. And then you get there and it's like a totally different experience than you thought it was going to be. So the more that you can lay groundwork for expectations of like, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I want. Don't commit to being in this game if you're not willing to commit to that sort of vibe. And obviously everyone's going to bring different experiences to the table, and you don't have to all be perfectly identical, but you have to know that, like, this game is going to be absurd, off the wall silliness. I want people who are going to be willing to crack jokes, who are going to be willing to do crazy things, just for the sake of causing chaos and confusion. I want that. And then the person who signs up for that game, that they know that's what you want, and vice versa. If you want super serious, super drama, super heavy role play, say that up front. The more that you can kind of lay groundwork, the more that you can kind of filter out things that aren't going to work before you even get to that situation of actually sitting at the table and realizing that you've like made a horrible mistake with what group you've joined or what person that you've picked for the game.
This whole video has made me realize, and I think it's worth stating, that this, and I guess other group hobbies, but this I really is the most experience I have is with like D&D and stuff, is that it's hard to kind of get into casually, and cold. If you know people that play, you might be able to sit in on one of the games and that works perfectly, and you're lucky if you can do that. But I'm realizing it's a little bit difficult to dip your toe in without eventually really giving a lot to it. But then in the same respect, in my opinion, you get out at the very least what you put in or more. So if you aren't sure, if we've scared you away with saying it might take you 8 months to play, that's not 8 months of not having fun, and that's not 8 months of, just grinding out work and not talking to anybody. You're still in the hobby. It just takes 8 months to get to that special place that might be, the peak of your gaming, where you met all the best people you like to play with. But you are still going to play along the way and learn about games and be inspired by TV shows and all of the other things that come with it. But it is important to realize it is something that takes a lot of time. So just definitely consider that, but consider that, in my opinion, it's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Unless you guys have anything else to say, I'll call it here and say, in terms of comments, like what has been your experience in finding the group? Are you still looking, or have you found the group or your circle? As we've kind of talked about, this rotation of multiple people. And I know, like I said, we definitely all are edge cases, but I think that the way we got here is that it was the residue of a certain pattern, and we just happened to be the upswing of like, oh wow, there's a pattern in what we all did. And so what I think is really key is make sure that you don't judge your situation based on ours either. You might want to play an in-person game. Hopefully any of the concepts in this video are helping you, because we're like, the other thing too, real quick, you and I and James, like all of us have game mastered and played. And then you find this sort of triangulation where it's like, hey, you want a GM? And again, super not common. So what about you? Have you found your group? Or are you still looking for your group? And what tips, what ideas, what thoughts have we missed in this deep dive that got super, I think, introspective, like in terms of what you figured out, James? So what have we missed here? That's what I want to know. That was very rambly, but you get the picture. We're Tabletop Terrors. We're all about fun, creativity, RPGs, and sometimes rambling. If you like any of those things, you should really consider subscribing to our channel. But if you like this video, actually hit the like button. YouTube really likes that, and it shares it around more. And then the notification bell will also let you know when these videos are live, so you can watch them. What do you say I shut up and we do a Tabletarian toast?
May you mend the first break.
May you kill the first snake.
May you conquer everything you undertake.
Sláinte. So I'm not entirely sure how, but Coke has managed to make their Christmas cans. All they have to do to make it Christmas is put a polar bear on there, because of ads they ran a long time ago during Christmas. Like, I don't know the origins of that, but the important thing that my fiance pointed out to me and that I never noticed, and now you will always notice, is that the polar bears have human eyes. You can't see it here. They look like regular polar bear eyes, but they have human eyes with pupils and everything. And now that once you say that, you're like, it's really creepy to not have regular polar bear eyes on these regular polar bears.